You know, both our main political parties are on the nose. There's a sort of public disgust with politics as usual that in America has made Donald Trump president, and in Britain had voters vote to leave the European Union. Now, just have a look at yesterday's Essential Media poll. It is incredible how far the traditional two big parties have fallen. Labor to 37% of the primary vote and the Liberals to just 32%. And that means a third of voters want an alternative now. And look who they are increasingly looking to. Pauline Hanson's One Nation, they're on 10%, more than even the Greens, even though that is backed by the ABC. Now, let me give you a measure of how much the political scene is changing. To this day, every Liberal party, state and federal, at every election has put One Nation last on the voting ticket. They've treated it as too extreme to tolerate. And Malcolm Turnbull used to think that way too, before the election.
Well, Pauline Hanson is, as far as we're concerned, not a welcome presence on the Australian political scene.
But then Hanson won 4 Senate seats, became very crucial, and now polls show her as a potential kingmaker in 2 state elections this year, Western Australia and Queensland. And suddenly, Liberal power brokers starting in Western Australia have decided that, whoops, maybe they do want Hanson's preferences after all these years. And the Prime Minister was asked about that today.
The West Australian division of the Liberal Party is sitting down with Senator Hanson to discuss preferences, and this, which could see a deal that would be the first of time that any division of the Liberal Party anywhere in Australia has not put her last since 2001. Could you outline for us how her views might have evolved in the last 15 years that make her any less offensive than she was back when John Howard put her last?
Look, I thank you for your inquiry, but the decisions about preferences in the West Australian election are matters for the West Australian division of the party.
So there's this massive change happening in the political scene, and the big parties have to change. And that's just as the Labor leader admitted just yesterday.
In these unusual times, politics as usual simply doesn't cut it anymore.
But as I said yesterday, business as usual is exactly what they got from Bill Shorten in his big speech at the National Press Club. He offered all the same old stuff, same-sex marriage, reconciliation, more spending, all that identity politics. The only concession to the none-of-the-above crowd was the promise of a crackdown on politicians' expenses, and whoopee-doo. Now, the Prime Minister today in his speech to the Press Club talked up his own crackdown on politicians' expenses and added a crackdown on political donations from overseas, and those were his only concessions to the Hanson voters and the other disaffected. Trouble is, even that pitch flopped, because there's one donation that Malcolm Turnbull today then refused to disclose to the public, his own, just how much he himself had given the Liberals last year. Was it $1 million? Was it $2 million?
Any matter of public importance, any public information that can be disclosed more promptly or in as close to real time as possible should be.
Will you tell us now what you donated to the Liberal Party last election?
My donations to the Liberal Party have been regular and generous, and I'd encourage others to do the same.
How embarrassment. Why the secrecy? Otherwise, I have to say, Turnbull's speech today was pretty prime ministerial and certainly miles better than Shorten's. He talked about, for example, the need to cut our very high company tax rates to get companies investing and hiring more Australians. And he defended free trade, which does make us richer despite all the hoo-ha now. There was nothing at all wrong with Turnbull's speech, which was clearly so important to the nervous Prime Minister. Look at the polls. That he arranged overnight for an auto cue, which is very unusual for him, so he could read it and get it absolutely right. No waffling for once. And Turnbull did make clear he was going to really hammer Labor on a really mad promise to triple the renewable energy that it's going to force Australians to use by 2030. A Labor promise of a 50% renewable energy target that will cost us nearly $50 billion. $50 billion. Now, that global warming policy of Labor, as Turnbull said, it's going to send your power prices through the roof and make the whole power system as dodgy as South Australia's.
South Australia, now with the most expensive and least secure energy, has had its wake-up call. One storm blacked out the entire state. But Labor snores on, heedless of what awaits the rest of the country if Labor governments and would-be governments continue their mindless rush into renewables.
Now, that's all good stuff, and I think Turnbull has himself a very powerful weapon there. But were any Australians really tuning in to any of this? I mean, it impresses us here at Sky because politics is our business, but is it a snooze fest for everyone else? And you see, here I think is the problem, the bigger problem. For Shorten, it is enough for him just to beat the Liberals and become Prime Minister. For Turnbull, it is enough just to beat Labor and stay Prime Minister. But for millions of Australians, that is no longer enough at all. They don't want to vote for one party just because it's not as bad as the other. So, our political crisis will go on for a long time yet.